we talked a little bit before we got started, and I was kind of joking around saying people really don't know what blue zones are, what the philosophy about that is. Can you explain that in a nutshell in a way that the community can understand the concept and what the importance of this and the the potential outcomes for our community will be?
Sure. So Blue Zones Project essentially takes the lessons of the original Blue Zones, which are five hotspots of longevity where people were living better longer. And not just 80 years, not just 90 years. There were concentrations of centenarians, people living over 100 years of age in these longevity hotspots. And these longevity hotspots, while they were near water, they really didn't have much in common, right? Different geographic locations, different ethnicities, different socioeconomic activities. But what they did have in common is what we call our Power Nine, which are characteristics that enhance a community's well being through healthier and happier behaviors. So, those nine commonalities really holistically work together to create a culture and environment where the healthy choice is the most easy and natural choice. And that's what we want to reverse engineer in Jacksonville and say, one, how do we empower and inspire our community to want to live better and live longer? And then two, what are environmental changes that we can help create through policy and places work that will help support those lifestyle changes long term?
Okay, so how many neighborhoods here in Jacksonville have you sort of identified that can experience this blue zone transformation?
Sure. So that's a little bit of a two-part question, right?
Right.
So we are a community-wide project.
Mhm.
Our government is consolidated, so any policy efforts go throughout the entire community, as well as our schools. We are one school district, so when we work in schools and a lot of that coming from the top, that ends up happening and supporting all of our schools. We are working specifically with people and places in five designated zip codes. So that's 32206, 32208, 32209, 32210, and 32244. And we're not coming from an approach that is saying that these communities need the most help. We're coming from an approach that says there's a lot of good stuff here. The amenities that are here can allow us and help us help these communities make healthier and happier choices. For example, 32208, when we did a Gallup poll and data, had the highest optimism of what their life was going to look like in the next 10 years, right? That's something we could capitalize off of. 32209 has the most churches out of any neighborhood and zip code in Jacksonville. That's a community of faith-based and religious belonging people that we can capitalize off of. So we really come from an asset-based approach in this work, and then it'll allow us to co-create that culture and environment with community.
I like the terminology reverse engineering because when people hear the zip codes that you identify, they think in urban core,
Yep.
poor neighborhoods,
Hmm.
right? But you're saying that you're identifying those things that are working well in those communities and using that to stand on to reverse engineer better outcomes.
That's right. That's exactly it.
Okay, what are some steps that are being taken to assure the long-term sustainability and growth for these blue zones in Jacksonville?
Sure. So first and foremost, we've got incredible partnerships at the table, helping us do that. Right, that have said that we're going to make not only a financial but also a capacity building commitment. So we have incredible sponsors at the table: Baptist Health, Brooks Rehab, City of Jacksonville, Community First Credit Union, Florida Blue, Jacksonville Jaguars, Jacksonville University, Jesse Ball DuPont Fund, Mayo Clinic, UF Health, and United Way of Northeast Florida. So those already existing institutions are an incredible support system and foundation for us to get started. And then what we get to do is to really build trust and build relationships with organizations, with people, with the matriarchs and patriarchs of communities to say, how can we better assist and support rather than coming in with our own plan and what we need. So we've spent about a year doing what we call discovery, which is a deep dive into what's happening. What do we already know to be true? Because there's no need to reinvent the wheel with a ton of good work that's happening in Jacksonville, but also to listen and to let people get to know us, for us to get to know them, and to really build those relationships and trust so that we can continue to move forward and create those environmental and cultural changes.
So are people from the community play a major role
A
in the
100%.
discovery part of this?
100%.
Yeah. So years ago, when I worked for the Department of Health, we were working in a space called health equity, right? And I know that health equity is one of the terminologies that you all use in terms of how you look at the lens you look through in order to reverse engineer these communities. How are people receiving the information that you're bringing? Because these communities have been worked on for a long time. for lack of a better term, and people are always bringing in different programs that are that serve as duplication of effort in many cases. How are people, these communities, emerging in a leadership role and involving themselves in these reverse engineering efforts?
That's a great question. One of the things that we have done is we have opened up our governing body to the neighborhoods. So we have neighborhood representation on our steering committee and board that help us move the needle forward and say that makes sense, that doesn't make sense, from each of the zip codes, right? So we have Mia Habdi from 32209 with Edward Waters sitting on our board. We've got Alita Turner, who is a parent advocate and entrepreneur and small business owner on the west side that's helping us move work forward. So we've really brought them into the table to help, one, build trust and build credibility by working with well-known people in the community, but then also for us to have just an additional perspective, right? I was raised in the Brentwood area, but that doesn't mean that I know what Brentwood is like right now, right? Because I'm not in there. So really making sure that we align ourselves with the people in community and matriarchs and patriarchs that are doing the work is incredibly important. Honey Holzendorf is one of our favorite people to work with out east, and she is just an incredible leader that is trusted. And when we tag along with her and she says Blue Zones is okay and someone that you should work with, that really allows us to help move the work forward. And so we don't take for granted the community's stance in this project.
So are you collaborating with other programs or initiatives within the community, and if so, what are some of those?
Yeah, we have a ton of partners, if you will. Groundworks Jacks, Lift Jacks, Northeast Florida Healthy Start, the Community Foundation, First Baptist Church of Oakland, Northside Church of Christ, Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association. There's so many that I can name off the top of my head, but they are all incredible partners in this work and have signed on to say we want to help and be a part of this.
So how do you know when you're making progress? What kind of achievements are you proud of so far?
Sure. So we are a data-driven project.
Mm-hmm.
So we have an incredible project manager that keeps all of our datas and everything to the T. And what we do have from Blue Zones on a national organization level is what we call certification targets, to say this is what we have seen in other communities that move the work forward. So engaging 15% of the population, working with at least 25% of the workforce, working with at least 10% of the grocery stores in the area. So we really kind of take that model and then say, what does that look like in Jacksonville? And then say, let's break that down, right? So, for example, right now, one of our 5-year long-term goals is to work with 12 grocery stores. We're currently working with Farmery Bakery and Bodega to be a Blue Zones approved grocery store. So that's a metric that
what does it mean when they're Blue Zones approved?
So when they're Blue Zones approved, that means that they have taken an extra step in their operational structure to make the healthy choice the easiest choice. So for example, adding QR codes that give information and recipes on a vegetable that may have just come in. It could look like, having a Blue Zone shelf of beans and greens, staples in the diet that we talk about, so that are easily identifiable and recognizable for community members to say, okay, that's an healthy choice for me, and I have a way to prepare it. So just those additional steps to really say, how do we make this easiest at best for our community members? And it's work. It definitely is a process. So we are so grateful for those partners that want to really take those extra steps. And we work with them along the way. Our goal is to not change what they are currently doing. Our goal is to say, what are things that we can add, enhance, or switch out to really be in community and empower that community to make that choice.
So what are some of the major challenges that you're encountering? Again, because what we're trying to do is to sort of help people understand that Blue Zones Project is different than what people have been experiencing in terms of how we improve various communities, especially those zip codes that you identified earlier. What have been some of the barriers to getting things done, things that are challenging for these neighborhoods and these zip codes?
Sure. So I think there's a both and when we talk about skepticism.
Mm-hmm.
I often say if people weren't skeptical of this work, I'd have a bigger problem because they should be. They have every single right to be skeptical and concerned of what this looks like. And so it is our job to bring some of those tangible pieces to say, we're here, we understand, and this is something that we've worked on to show you. The other part of that is Jacksonville has a lot going on.
Yeah.
So sometimes we just don't are all, we're not always in the know, or we're hearing something a bit later. And so we just really, those partnerships are important because we want to know as much as possible, while also, we can't be everywhere all at once, all of the time.
Mm.
And then also just identifying and really leaning into relationships. There's a lot of deep trust with relationships and certain people wanting to work with certain people and past things that have come up. So we
Alliances.
really try to be mindful of relationships to navigate that as best we can, because we are the neutral party that wants to amplify, that wants to uplift, that wants to support. And so just being able and being careful to navigate and try to bring more collaboration and cohesion rather than the silos of projects that we're used to.
So, in working with people in the community, you've identified, specific needs that they have raised their hand and said, "We need this. It'd be better for our community if we had that." How much of that involves significant policy change, and have you identified any policy changes that you're currently working on that we need to know about, the community can get behind or talk about?
Yeah, 100%. So we break our policy areas into four different sectors, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So the built environment, so what is actually happening around us, our parks, our sidewalks, our pedestrianism, our streets, food systems, right? Not necessarily food insecurity, but how do we strengthen and create a better system of food locally? And then tobacco policy as well as alcohol policy. So we are so proud that our policy team just went to bat with City Council and unanimously got smoke-free parks passed throughout Jacksonville, which is an incredible accomplishment. Cigarettes, tobacco products, smoke products can have 70 chemicals that can be extremely deadly and complicate our healthcare respiratory system. So to get that out of our parks so that we can play and enjoy the natural park system that we have is an incredible win, as well as, being in alignment and understanding some of the nuances of certain policies that may come up with a lot of development in downtown that will spill over into these sister neighborhoods. What does that look like, and staying on top of it? And then we're currently supporting the city with their Vision Zero action plan that an RFP actually just went out. And Vision Zero action plan basically says we want to build and reduce pedestrian fatalities by 2030 to a zero. We don't want anybody being hurt or dying by a car crash or an accident. So that's a really big one that unfortunately Jacksonville has been behind the curve in terms of pedestrian fatalities. It's a sad statistic here that we really want to help try to course correct and working with the city on.
Yeah. So, the Blue Zones project, and overlaid with the whole concept of Blue Zones is something that's very large, right? The concept is large, and it perhaps people don't really understand in totality how what's been going on in other parts of the world actually aligns with things that are happening here.
Mm-hmm.
How do you bring this to a level where when people are looking at, some of the successes or the philosophy behind Blue Zones in other areas of the world where people are living healthier lives, living healthier lifestyles, how do you bring that to a level where people in these communities can understand that they can have that too?
Yeah. So on the most very basic level, and I feel strongly about this, is that everyone deserves access. And to our core, we know that, but sometimes our environment has told us and has shown us that maybe we don't. So we really get to work with people and places and schools and policy to create that access and a better way of creating that access. And then also taking it a little bit deeper is making sure that people can see themselves in these characteristics of the longevity principles that we've learned. Moving naturally, going on a walk, taking time for yourself, taking a nap, meditation or yoga, downshifting, knowing your purpose. Like those are all things that you can wrap your hands around of saying, well, maybe I don't know my purpose. Maybe that's something I could lean into. Or I love taking a walk with my dogs and my kids every day. So really understanding that this isn't something that is new. It is something that is inherent that you can do and you can have. And when you start to really embrace that and understand that, then when we add these layers and programs and environmental changes on top of it, a whole new world really begins to open up for our community members.
Okay. You're listening to First Coast Connect. I'm Charles Griggs, and we're having a conversation with Nicole Ham. She's the executive director for project, Blue Zones project here in Jacksonville. We are talking about how Blue Zones has a positive impact on our community, and I'm curious again. Of course, I want to stay with how do we bring this home, right? How do we bring this? How do we make people feel empowered, and they can see the things that are going on in other parts of the world? Do you believe that? Do you take people outside of their current environments and show them what's going on in other communities, how what access looks like, and what an impact that has on their life might have on their lives?
Sure. So with our current Netflix docuseries, we've been doing screenings around the community so that people can see these other longevity hotspots in communities. But to your point, we're doing it in their community.
Yeah.
So you see these secrets of dancing and having a glass of wine at night and brain games. There was an older Sicilian woman, drawing pictures in Italy. So that really kind of begins to tie home. We just did one at Edward Waters University on Monday, and we asked, what are some things that you'll take away? And one of the women said, dance more,
Right.
laugh more,
Right.
talk to my children more. Those things that you just saw on a TV screen really hit home because you're in your neighborhood and you can see it and you can bring it down into your life. As far as taking people out of their neighborhood, like on trips and seeing other pieces, not necessarily, but we do always bring examples into our work groups and sections of saying, well, this is how that policy has looked in Albert Lee, Minnesota, or this is what changing tobacco policy has done in Fort Worth, Texas.
Right.
So we definitely try to bring those real world examples, but also just meeting people where they are in those neighborhoods.
So you brought up the documentary, so I'm gonna, we're gonna talk about that a little bit. Live to 100: The Secrets of Blue Zones. Talk a little bit about the documentary. I know that Blue Zones Project Jacksonville isn't specifically in it, but it does identify the concepts behind Blue Zones, right? It's a Netflix documentary.
Yeah, so the Netflix documentary Live to 100, it's a 4-part series that really, as I mentioned, those 5 longevity hotspots, Nicoya Peninsula, Costa Rica, Icaria, Greece, Sardinia, Italy, Loma Linda, California, and Okinawa, Japan. It explores Dan Buettner's travels to those communities and their secrets. Right, one of our favorite, my team and I, we love Romero in Costa Rica. He looks 70 years old. He's 101, and he's riding a horse. He's talking about how he makes corn tamales every morning, and so there's just these relatable stories of actual people that you can see and identify with. And people talk about how they eat,
Right.
how they do activity, how they view their family and their loved ones, how their loved ones view them, the different respect and longevity for their elders in different communities. All of those pieces really play a part. And when you get to see that, and then on that final episode, when they talk about doing this in I'll say the Western world of America, if you will, that reverse engineering, saying all of these lessons are doable. How do we do them community by community? And that's where our project really comes in, of saying, you've seen all of these things. You've seen how they work. You've heard from the people. Let's do that here.
Okay. We got a call from Stanley. Stanley's on the north side. Good morning, Stanley.
Yeah, good morning to everybody.
Good morning.
My concern, I travel this whole country and to other countries around the world. My concern, I never hear, when it comes to Jacksonville, talking about leadership. Our research showed, and like I say, my worldwide travel showed that nothing take place until leadership take leadership position to make a difference for everybody involved. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Stanley. And let's talk about that a little bit. Your organization is fairly new here. How has local leadership embraced the Blue Zones project concepts? And are people all in? You mentioned a handful, a lot of really local partners, right? But what about local elected officials? Local, state, federal. How's that working out in terms
Sure.
of leadership, and what type of an impact are you looking for from those people?
100%, and that's a great question. And leadership is extremely important. We have a really great relationship with the mayor's administration and the mayor herself. So Lynn Sherman, her executive director of health programs, sits on our board. and make sure that the city knows what's going on and reporting that up. We've also been involved in conversations led by the administration's director of strategic partnerships, as well as having those conversations with elected officials, not just to get policy passed, but what are their priorities and how does that align with Blue Zone? So our policy team does an incredible job of keeping those relationships tight, and we make sure that we are continuously reporting out. And then we also go a step further to say that every year we want to bring those CEOs, those mayors to the table and give them a high level look at this project, and not just locally, but what's happening on a national level, what's happening on an international level. So we call it an annual CEO roundtable. The mayor attends, the CEO of Baptist, the CEO of the Jesse Bell DuPont Front. Those leaders come in and we give them that high level overview. And then more than anything, a lot of my job is connecting with local leaders of local nonprofits. George Maxey is an incredible example that we have conversations and we are in contact. So ensuring that we have those relationships with leaderships is incredibly important, and we're proud of the work that we're doing there.
Okay. All right. So we're going to be keeping an eye on what Blue Zones Project Jacksonville is doing in the near future. And we appreciate you coming in and spending some time with us to give us an opportunity to learn more about what you're doing.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Nicole Ham and Blue Zones Project Jacksonville. We'll be